Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, presented by Amity University, ranked amongst the top 3% universities globally. Skoda, superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
First, the news from Pakistan. It wants to talk peace, and you heard that right. We'll tell you more about it. Then Myanmar. It's day 3 of the coup there, but the world cannot condemn it officially because China blocks the United Nations from doing so. Then we have Sri Lanka drowning under Chinese debt and scrapping a port deal with India and Japan. 2021 looks like it's going to be an action-packed year for India's neighbourhood. Amid the pandemic and vaccine supplies, there's a lot of changing equations to deal with. How will New Delhi work with these shifts? Will it engage with dictators or will it shun them to uphold democracy? Is there a middle path that India can follow? How do you remain a player without talking to the other side? On Gravitas tonight, we'll bring you up to speed with what's happening in India's neighbourhood. Developments which may not seem significant on their own, but are indeed very important if you join the dots and look at the big picture. Also on the show, no end to Britain's virus woes. The Wuhan virus has mutated for a second time there, turning into a more dangerous version of itself. Will the vaccine still work? We'll tell you. In China, the WHO probe team finally got access to the infamous Wuhan lab as Beijing continues the guided tour and denies media access to the investigators. Iran is at a crossroads. The parliament has rejected Hassan Rouhani's budget in an election year with the economy in tatters. And the world's rich and famous could give us tips on the art of leaving. The latest to step down is Jeff Bezos, no more the CEO of Amazon. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
The Indian government has sent a legal notice to Twitter after the social media giant unilaterally unblocked over 250 handles that used or retweeted the hashtag farmer genocide. The handles had been blocked after a government directive citing law and order concerns. US President Joe Biden signs 3 executive orders dealing with asylum at the US-Mexico border and legal immigration. Authorities are to form a task force to reunite families separated at the border. The Taliban have said that an Islamic government will replace the ruling government in Afghanistan as the terror group seeks to form an inclusive establishment following the culmination of the US-led Afghan peace talks. Saudi Arabia suspends entry from 20 countries in a bid to curb the spread of COVID-19 infections. The ban applies to countries including the US, India, Lebanon and Turkey. A prototype of SpaceX's Starship rocket exploded during a landing attempt minutes after a high-altitude experimental launch, in a repeat of an accident that destroyed a previous test rocket. The rocket is being developed by SpaceX to carry humans on future missions to the Moon and Mars. Two FBI agents died and 3 were injured during an early morning raid at a Florida home. According to the FBI, the officers were executing a court-ordered search warrant, which was issued in connection with suspected possession of child pornography. Flash floods triggered by heavy rain killed 2 people in Turkey's northwestern province of Izmir. Footage released by the municipality showed heavy rainfall causing a river to burst its banks as water raged through the streets. Municipality officials said that 673 homes and workplaces were submerged. The Eiffel Tower is getting a facelift ahead of the 2024 Paris Olympics, including a paint job giving it a distinctly golden hue. This is the most extensive revamp of its 130-year history. The Eiffel Tower will serve as a backdrop for the triathlon and open water swimming events in the Olympics. Between 500 and 600 tennis players, officials and support staff are set to go into fresh isolation in Melbourne. A worker at one of the Australian Open's quarantine hotels had tested positive for COVID-19, which has prompted those staying there to be classified as casual contacts. They will all be tested on Thursday and only allowed to leave isolation if negative. Victoria Premier Daniel Andrews has insisted that the Grand Slam, which starts on the 8th of February, is currently not under threat. Manchester United have equalled the Premier League's biggest ever win with a 9-0 thrashing of Southampton. The visitors had a player sent off after just 2 minutes and were run ragged by a United side that posted 6 different scorers. The Saints then had a second player sent off in the 86th minute, and United added 3 more goals in 6 minutes to condemn Leicester to their second 9-goal hammering in consecutive seasons.
Our cover story tonight is about India's neighbourhood. It's a happening place, we can tell you. Delhi has a lot on its plate. Pakistan wants to talk peace. China remains aggressive. Myanmar has seen a coup and Sri Lanka has scrapped a key project with India and Japan. The neighbourhood first policy will need a reboot. And that's what we'll discuss tonight. Let's start with the most intractable neighbour of all, Pakistan. And this one has caught many by surprise. The Pakistani army chief is talking peace. General Qamar Javed Bajwa has said, and I'm quoting, "It is time to extend a hand of peace in all directions. The message is not lost on anyone." General Bajwa is talking about India here. You may wonder why this is significant. Pakistan has offered to talk many times in the past, and India has declined that invitation every time, saying it has zero tolerance policy against terrorism. Talks and terror do not go hand in hand, is what Delhi says. So what's different this time? It is the tone of the general. Bajwa was at the graduation ceremony of Pakistan Air Force cadets. He chose this opportunity to tone down the rhetoric. Let me quote from his speech. "We stand firmly committed to the ideal of mutual respect and peaceful coexistence. Pakistan and India must also resolve the long-standing issue of Jammu and Kashmir in a dignified and peaceful manner as per the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir and bring this human tragedy to its logical conclusion." Pakistan should be talking to itself about this. It follows a military doctrine of bleeding India with 1,000 cuts. That's what they say. Now, the army chief is talking about, quote-unquote, peaceful coexistence. This could be an outreach or simply an attempt to make the right noises just before the FATF, or the Financial Action Task Force, sits down to review terror financing in Pakistan. It is too soon to make an assessment. But with his words, the general has certainly caught New Delhi's attention. It may be time to review the stand, some say. India has tried everything with Pakistan. Successive governments have tried everything. The Prime Minister began his first term with his Pakistani counterpart in attendance. The first of its kind invite, but we all know how things went downhill from there. 7 years on, it may be time to engage and see what kind of pressure India can bring to bear on Pakistan. It's a gamble, but India is not really spoiled for choice here. Then we come to Myanmar. Another challenge there. Security at the Indo-Myanmar border has been beefed up as the Burmese military takes control of all government institutions. The general behind the coup, Min Aung Hlaing, is now saying that the coup is legal and it was inevitable. Western powers are in no mood to forgive. The United States has classified the takeover as a coup, but China seems to be blocking any efforts to reinstate democracy in Myanmar. Yesterday, the United Nations Security Council failed to condemn the coup. Why? Because China vetoed the statement. At the same time, Beijing took offence when journalists asked if China has supported the coup or if it gave a tacit consent to military rule.
Relevant theories are not true. As Myanmar's friendly neighbouring country, we wish that all sides in Myanmar can appropriately resolve their differences and uphold political and social stability.
China rejects the suggestion that it supported the military takeover in Myanmar, but it still won't call what happened in Myanmar a coup. And it continues to cast a shadow over India's ties with its neighbours, like Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has gone back on a deal that it made with India and Japan. The East Container Terminal Deal Agreement has been scrapped. It's a port deal. This agreement was signed in 2019. India and Japan had joined hands with Sri Lanka and they had agreed to develop a strategic terminal at the Colombo port. India and Japan would have owned 49% of the shares in this terminal, with Sri Lanka's Ports Authority retaining the majority stake. But now Colombo has scrapped it. It seems like Colombo's move caught Indian diplomats by surprise. The Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka issued a statement reminding Sri Lanka that this was a trilateral agreement. The statement asks, quote-unquote, all sides to abide by existing understandings and commitment. A message to Sri Lanka to honour its deal. But the Rajapaksas are unlikely to relent. Reports say Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has said that Sri Lanka's Ports Authority will hold complete operational rights over this port. At the same time, a compensatory offer has been made. Reports say Sri Lanka's cabinet has approved another proposal. This one is to develop the western terminal at the Colombo port. It remains to be seen how New Delhi responds to this. And then there's one more neighbour orchestrating most of this trouble. China remains as difficult as ever. No progress in the border standoff. Next time someone says, love thy neighbour, think of India's lot. And while the entire neighbourhood seems to be in a flux, the most dramatic changes are taking place in Myanmar. The military coup by the generals is being backed by China. Within Myanmar, the voices of opposition are rising. The citizens have found a unique way to protest against the coup.
Car horns, pots and pans, anti-coup slogans. These sounds fill the air of Yangon on Tuesday. The biggest show of public anger since the military staged a coup 2 days ago.
We joined in with the banging of pots last night until they went out of shape. We did this because this is the only thing that we are able to do at the moment. I'm glad I did it, and at the same time, we want the international community to be aware of this situation because we are not able to fight back in terms of power against them.
Myanmar saw no violence after the coup, but it's not calm either. Beneath the surface, a civil disobedience movement is brewing. Members of the medical fraternity wore a red ribbon to signal their loyalty to Aung San Suu Kyi. Meanwhile, the generals intensified their crackdown on the democratically elected leader. Suu Kyi has now been accused of illegally importing radios. She has been put in detention till the 15th of February. The United Nations has again called for her release.
The special envoy also called for the immediate release of Aung San Suu Kyi and President Win Myint and dozens of political leaders, family members, and activists who have been detained. She reiterated that this is a serious blow to democratic reforms in Myanmar.
The people of Myanmar now stare at an uncertain and difficult future. The Western powers are threatening sanctions. This will be a body blow for Myanmar's economy, and not a new one either. In the 1990s, Myanmar suffered tough sanctions. They severely limited investment, job creation, and the country's borrowing ability. But the military managed to bypass sanctions through its own companies and opaque deals. According to historian Thanh Minh Yu, heroin production was one of the roads to riches for the military. Millions of acres of land was confiscated from locals when the sanctions became too harsh. This land was leased or sold to former black marketeers, drug lords and cronies of the generals. Business owners in Myanmar today fear that the coup is a return to the past and their businesses will now face international isolation.
It is difficult to work under an unelected government. It creates major concerns for investment. International businesses will have difficulties coming into the country. The market is very narrow in Myanmar. It would be more difficult for other countries to work here if Myanmar is put under sanctions. If so, then they will leave Myanmar to maintain their image. So the coup will affect our businesses and especially foreign investment. The coup affects foreign currency exchange. The market will cool down. We will be reluctant to make purchases. Our major concern is how we maintain a banking system if we are put under US sanctions.
Already, America has threatened to impose sanctions on Myanmar after the coup. But if history is any proof, sanctions are a blunt instrument. They may turn away international investors. But the military that holds all the cards now can survive any financial curbs. Ultimately, it's the people of Myanmar who will suffer. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The army has seized control in Myanmar several times in the past. This is not the first coup. In 1958, 1962, 1988, so waking up to a coup was not really a new feeling for many people there. But it certainly was a feeling they thought they had moved on from. Convinced that coups were a thing of the past for their country. But they were wrong. As we wrapped up our show last night, we gave out a message for the people of Myanmar. We asked them to reach out to us, and some very strong images have emerged from Yangon. The city was roaring with the sounds of beating drums. This was a well-coordinated demonstration. That's a loud message of disapproval to the army generals of Myanmar. Our response team was flooded with messages on Instagram, on YouTube, Facebook, email, but mostly on WhatsApp. There were pleas for help. There were messages to world leaders asking them to speak up, requests for the United Nations to intervene. Let me read out some of those messages, some of those responses tonight, and we won't be revealing the names of those who have sent them to us or the phone numbers or the location, which we believe is very important for their safety. But these words must go out to the world. The first respondent says, "Hi, I'm from Myanmar. The coup has destroyed our youth's dreams and future. I have just one request. Can the United Nations take action for this coup? They just take the weapons to scare us, not protect us. Please, please help." This is from a citizen of Myanmar. The second response says, "Hello, WION News. I'm a Burmese citizen studying in the University of Computer Studies in Morbin. We cannot allow for Myanmar to go down its dark path again. We've endured so much already for about 50 years. After military coups, they always say that just 1 year, but you can see history. That's not it. We all need to take part in civil disobedience. We are begging world leaders to please help us." And then the message says, "We tried to hear that sounds to the world at 8 p.m. yesterday. We'll make this again at 8 p.m. tonight too." The next respondent says, "As we, the citizens of Myanmar, not agree with the current move and would like to request the world leaders, the United Nations and the world's media help our country, our leaders and our people from this bitter act. We want democracy and want our country to develop as neighboring countries. Hashtag Save Myanmar." These were just a few of the responses. There were plenty more. We do aim to air all of them, but it won't be possible on this show given the numbers we've received. But if you have a strong story to share, if you have a personal story to share, if you're an eyewitness who has seen the coup unfold, who believes that the world must hear about your story, send it to us. You can get in touch with us on WhatsApp, on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. You can email us. Let WION be your voice. And I will repeat this once again. This is what we told you yesterday as well. Send us your story or your message only if it is safe for you to do so. Now a question. What do Myanmar, Pakistan and Sri Lanka have in common? Number one, growing Chinese influence. I'm sorry. Chinese President Xi Jinping has visited two of these countries. He's infused billions of dollars into all of them, and all three countries are part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. Common factor number two, all three countries are India's immediate neighbours. How India responds to the developments across the border is crucial for its diplomatic goals and its role in the post-pandemic world. Allow me to explain, and I'll start with another question. What role does India want to play in the post-pandemic world? India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently told his party that India has a big role to play in the emerging new world order. The Prime Minister drew parallels between this decade and the one following the Second World War. He reportedly said that unlike earlier, India is not going to be a mute spectator this time. India is expanding its global footprint, becoming more vocal at global forums, reaffirming its presence. India recently paid its United Nations regular budget assessment in full. New Delhi has entered the United Nations Security Council as a non-permanent member. This is the third time since the end of the Cold War. India will stay on this council for the next 2 years. India has plans and a list of issues it wants to raise. The expansion of the Security Council to begin with, in both permanent and non-permanent categories. Counter-terrorism, again, a priority for India, as is multilateralism, taking everyone along. And if there are priorities and opportunities, there are also challenges for India at the world stage. The biggest challenge comes from China. Beijing heads at least 6 United Nations organizations. It has previously shielded Pakistani terrorists. It has raised Kashmir at the UNSC at Pakistan's behest. China is now blocking a resolution on the Myanmar coup. What China is doing is basically playing politics. It is trading its veto power at global forums for support, land and business in the neighbourhood. India needs to break the streak. If India wants to emerge as a global leader in the post-pandemic world, it must build strategic alliances, expand its outreach programs and begin all of this by concentrating on its neighbourhood first, emerging as its clear, uncontested leader. It's a neighbourhood that is evolving, experimenting with democracy, being threatened by dictatorship, witnessing changing geopolitics. India must respond to all of this with seasoned diplomacy. 30 years ago, India condemned the military rule in Myanmar. Today, it may not be that simple. India should not burn bridges. It should not feel compelled to follow the West. Do you know why? Because that would only push Myanmar closer to China. And if that happens, India has more to lose than, say, the United States, which is threatening sanctions. There is counter-terrorism, strategic projects involved. India must maintain diplomatic ties with Myanmar. At the same time, it must be careful to not legitimize dictatorship. The situation in Sri Lanka also calls for an innovative approach. It is a turf where India and China are fighting for greater influence. Heated exchanges between Colombo and New Delhi only help the dragon. China will try to whip up nationalistic sentiments in Sri Lanka. Like it did in Nepal, India must use trust to counter China's wolf warrior diplomacy. It must support the neighbourhood, use programs like Vaccine Maitri to steer the region away from dependence on Chinese checkbooks. India must shift the balance away from Beijing, rely on history, people-to-people connect, culture, accept the olive branch when offered. Safeguard its national interests, cement ties with neighbours. Not talking is an easy option, it's also a bad option. India must win the trust of its neighbourhood first, emerge as its leader before it steps into a leadership role outside it. What about China? Wuhan specifically, where China is stage managing the visit from the WHO team. The investigators paid a visit to the controversial Wuhan laboratory today, and they were surrounded by Chinese government officials and police officers in plain clothes. Despite spending 2 weeks in quarantine, the investigators cannot meet the public. In a way, they're still in quarantine. Our next report tells you more.
Did you find anything inside?
In the past week, the World Health Organization team has been given a guided tour of Wuhan as they look for the origins of the Wuhan virus. Despite completing an institutional quarantine, it looks like the investigators have been effectively quarantined from the Chinese public. They remain protected by Chinese officials and away from the public. The WHO team visited the controversial Wuhan lab, the same facility which is at the heart of several claims and theories. The US State Department under the Trump administration said the virus could have come from here. Washington said it had evidence to prove that researchers at this institute became sick in the fall of 2019. They allegedly showed symptoms consistent with the Wuhan virus. Will the WHO team investigate this charge? One member of the probe team said this before entering the Wuhan lab.
We're looking forward to meeting with all the key people here and asking all the important questions that need to be asked.
This is a rare statement from a member of the WHO team while in the field. China has kept the media at bay. No access has been given to these investigators. How can Beijing isolate a WHO team? China says it is only trying to avoid distractions. Its critics say it is stage managing the probe, first by dictating the terms of the investigation and now by controlling the media narrative. Reports say senior editors of Chinese media outlets have told their journalists not to interview the WHO experts. They'll need an approval from the Chinese Foreign Ministry first. While the WHO team continues its so-called probe, a vaccine scandal is exploding in China. 80 members of a crime ring have been arrested. They have been accused of making fake vaccines for the Wuhan virus. China says the accused were making these fake shots since September last year and selling them to other countries. Beijing hasn't shared which countries got the fake vaccines though.
As far as I know, China has informed the relevant countries of the situation. I would like to stress that the Chinese government highly values vaccine safety and will continue to take efforts to strictly prosecute any counterfeits, fake sales and illegal businesses, and other related actions that involve vaccines. At the same time, China will strengthen our law enforcement cooperation with the relevant countries to earnestly prevent the spread of this type of illegal and criminal action.
From the outbreak in Wuhan to the fake vaccines, China remains consistently opaque. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The UK variant of the Wuhan virus has picked up a new mutation. A mutation that could possibly help the virus escape antibody protection. Only 11 cases have been reported so far, but Britain is not taking any chances. A massive door-to-door testing campaign is underway. The plan is to reach at least 80,000 people. This basically is a double mutation. What does it mean for the global vaccination drive? A double mutation of the UK strain. Do we need new vaccines, or can scientists figure out a workaround? Our next report has more.
The more infectious, dangerous UK variant of the coronavirus is mutating again. And this time, scientists are worried. The new mutation, dubbed E484K, occurs on the spike protein, making it similar to the variants in Brazil and South Africa. While the vaccines worked against the first UK mutant, scientists are not sure about the new one. Most vaccines have proven less effective against the South African variant, a trait that the new UK variant is expected to display. 11 cases of the new mutant have been reported so far, mostly in southwest England. The British government has responded with a door-to-door mass testing drive. They are eager to avoid the mistakes made during the first and second wave.
We've seen a very small number of cases of this new mutation of concern, but it is absolutely critical that where we find them, we absolutely stamp on it.
But the big question is, will the vaccine still work? A new study has found that Pfizer's jab is less effective against the South African mutant. Neutralizing it required 10 times the antibodies. These mutants do not need a new vaccine, but the existing ones will have to be tweaked for efficiency.
So we may well need boosters that are of a slightly adjusted vaccine as well, in the same way that we do for flu each year. And we're working with the companies on that, on developing those, and then on ensuring that they can get regulated and they can be safely used much more quickly than first time around, because it's an adjustment to the vaccine rather than a completely new vaccine.
Until the vaccine is tweaked, the curbs will continue and social distancing will remain. These mutations also bolster the theory that COVID-19 could be an endemic disease, a seasonal infection that keeps changing. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Shifting focus to Russia, where Vladimir Putin's war on the Russian opposition has reached its most decisive moment. Alexei Navalny, the man they say Putin fears the most, has been sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. The Russian opposition leader has been charged with violating parole. How? By staying in Germany after he recovered from being poisoned. Navalny was poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent called Novichok. He went to Berlin for treatment and blamed the attack on the Kremlin. The Kremlin, in turn, called it a conspiracy by the West. Nonetheless, Navalny returned. Despite the obvious threat to his life, he came back to Russia. He was promptly detained, charged, put on trial, and now he's going to be in jail for the next 30 months. 3-0. International condemnation is pouring in over this decision. The German Foreign Ministry is calling it a bitter blow to fundamental freedoms and the rule of law in Russia. They're demanding Navalny's immediate release. So is the United Kingdom. The UK's Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, has called for the immediate and unconditional release of Alexei Navalny. The French president has also spoken. Emmanuel Macron has said, and I'm quoting, "Political disagreement is never a crime and democratic freedom is not negotiable." And lastly, the United States has asked Russia to free Navalny immediately and unconditionally again, along with all the hundreds of Russian citizens who have been wrongfully detained in recent weeks.
We are deeply concerned by Russian authorities' efforts, decision, I should say, to sentence opposition figure Alexei Navalny. Like every Russian citizen, Mr. Navalny is entitled to the rights provided in the Russian Constitution, and Russia has international obligations to respect equality before the law and the rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. We reiterate our call for the Russian government to immediately, unconditionally release Mr. Navalny, as well as the hundreds of other Russian citizens wrongfully detained in recent weeks for exercising their rights.
Back in Russia, there's fury on the streets. Hundreds of Navalny supporters are protesting. They're getting detained. The images are on your screen. You can see for yourself what's happening. The Kremlin has made it absolutely clear that it will not tolerate any demonstrations in Navalny's favor. More than 1,000 people were arrested on Tuesday alone. 1,000 arrests. More than 1,000 arrests in 24 hours. And more arrests are expected to follow. The protesters have slowly begun to fall back, fearing for their life.
If they can take Navalny so easily, who am I? Though I am the same regular Russian citizen who pays taxes.
Under this regime, life is getting harder. We have no future in 5-10 years, neither me nor my friends or brothers and sisters. No one has a future. It will only get worse.
It's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare.
So with the Kremlin's fiercest critic behind bars, what becomes of the Russian opposition? It was already dying a slow death. The future looks even more uncertain. You see, Russia is what they call a managed democracy. On paper, it is formally a democratic country, but it functions as a de facto autocracy. Vladimir Putin's party, United Russia, has held a majority in parliament since the year 2003. The vote share has fallen over the years, but the party's grip on power has remained unchallenged. A total of 6 parties have members in Russia's parliament, which is the State Duma. But none of them pose a serious threat to Putin's dominance. Alexei Navalny was their last hope. And he's the only man to have offered a serious challenge to Putin's 20-year rule. He turned his online exposés of corruption into a formidable political force. His witty posts, memes, pop culture references attracted millions. He became a darling of the opposition. Opposition leaders rallied behind him. But now he's in jail. The opposition in Russia may soon go back to what it was, a dying species. Let's talk about Iran. Iran is without a budget. The hardliners in parliament have rejected President Hassan Rouhani's draft proposal. They say it will lead to financial ruin. But beyond some technical differences, this is basically a battle of ideologies. There is an election coming up in Iran. Conservative parties are hoping to win the presidency. It's a high-stakes battle that will have implications for the whole of West Asia, especially on the Iran nuclear deal, which is already hanging by a thread.
A moderate president and a hardline conservative parliament. Doing legislative business in Iran is not easy. And with elections due in June, tensions are running high. On Tuesday, the two sides clashed over the annual budget. Out of 261 lawmakers, 148 rejected Hassan Rouhani's budget. 99 supported it. This back and forth has been going on for some time now. The budget was first introduced in early December. Conservatives say the plan is unrealistic, that it will run up a deficit and worsen inflation. A key concern is the projected oil sales. The government believes it can raise $8.1 billion from it. Critics argue that with Trump-era sanctions still intact, this projection is not achievable. Rouhani's government has a 2-week window to tweak the budget and send it back to the parliament. If the impasse continues, Iran will have to pass a temporary budget, not an ideal situation in an economy crippled by sanctions. The logjam over the budget is symbolic of Iran's larger political divide. Conservatives already control the parliament and the judiciary. Going by sentiments, they are likely to win the presidency in June, and this could have major implications on the nuclear deal. Joe Biden has signaled his willingness to talk, but he wants Iran to rejoin the deal before lifting sanctions. Tehran disagrees. It wants sanctions lifted before the deal is restored. Rouhani is willing to give diplomacy a chance. His successor may not. Conservatives have traditionally opposed the nuclear deal. They reject talks with the West, a position that has strengthened after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani and Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. Rouhani is under pressure both from within Iran and the international community. Regional powers, including Saudi Arabia, see a role for themselves in an expanded nuclear deal. But the president has ruled out any changes in the deal's terms. Take it or leave it. That was Rouhani's message.
This agreement is not something that was easily achieved. This is the agreement. If they want it, everyone must come into compliance. If they don't, they can go live their lives.
West Asia will be watching the upcoming polls closely. A conservative takeover could define regional politics for years to come. A stalled budget is just the tip of the iceberg. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
They say leave when you're in your prime so that the world discusses your decision, so that your followers miss your presence. Jeff Bezos certainly understands the significance of these words. The second richest man in the world is stepping down as the CEO of Amazon. The news has broken the internet. There are memes floating around. So are some questions. Why is Bezos stepping down? Who will run Amazon now? What does his exit mean for the company? And what does it say about the art of leaving?
His net worth is bigger than the GDP of many small to medium-sized countries. He made $152,000 per minute in 2020. He ranks among the best in the business today. But Jeff Bezos doesn't feel like attending Zoom meetings anymore. 27 years after he founded Amazon with his ex-wife, Jeff Bezos is now stepping down as the CEO of the multinational tech giant. The 57-year-old announced the move in a letter to his 1.3 million employees. He insisted that he isn't retiring, but wants to focus on his passions like space and climate change ventures. Their decision comes as Amazon faces unprecedented global scrutiny. From antitrust probes, to tax dodging, to mistreatment of workers, to making employees work at the peak of the pandemic, to controversial web series, and acting as an e-commerce gatekeeper. But Mr. Bezos doesn't have to worry about any of it. He has found his replacement. 53-year-old Andy Jassy, the current CEO of Amazon Web Services, and the man behind the controversy to cancel Parler last month. All the scrutiny is now Mr. Jassy's to deal with. What about Bezos? He is going to spend more time with his money. He seeks to conquer space and even save the planet. He'll be working on the Bezos Earth Fund to combat climate change and develop rockets through Blue Origin, his private spaceflight company. Bezos will also be joining the club of big names that left on a high. A club which includes Bill Gates, who retired in March 2020 to focus on philanthropic activities, and Jim Hackett, the former CEO of Ford, who retired in August 2020 to focus on family. Not only did these left at a time when the reputation of their organizations was at their worst. All we're saying is that there's more to Bezos stepping back than just a plan to make the world a better place. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now, there's no way we can wrap tonight's show without talking about what not just India, but the whole world now seems to be talking about: the Indian farmers' protest. I say Indian farmers' protest as opposed to the popular hashtag farmers' protest because there's something we seem to be missing out here. Amidst all the posts, the politics and the propaganda, the protest has to do with 3 Indian laws meant for Indian farmers, passed by Indian lawmakers and stayed by an Indian court. And while the world is free to talk, tweet, comment and take up causes, the scope does not go beyond that.
Freedom of speech is universal. Do you know what else is? An unwritten law that reads, with reach comes responsibility. It applies to entertainers, activists, world leaders, all alike. You know what we are referring to. The Indian farmers' protest. It is a movement that has been reduced to hashtags. The cause has been lost in clamour, courtesy uninformed opinion. Singer Rihanna recently asked a question on Twitter. Why isn't anyone talking about this? Hashtag farmers protest. Attached to the tweet was this article from CNN. It spoke paragraphs on internet being blocked around New Delhi, delivered a sermon on concerns about India's democracy, but said very little on what the farmers' protest is really about. Rihanna shared this with her 101 million plus followers on Twitter and sparked a chain reaction. Climate activist Greta Thunberg soon expressed solidarity with Indian farmers. Author and US Vice President Kamala Harris's niece, Meena Harris, followed. She says it is no coincidence that the world's oldest democracy was attacked not even a month ago, and as we speak, the most populous democracy is under assault. This is related, unquote. You know what? It is not related. America and India are not the same. Neither are our policies nor our governance. You cannot understand what's happening in India while sitting in Washington or Los Angeles. We live in a free world. Rihanna, Greta Thunberg, Meena Harris are all entitled to their opinions. But when you have a certain reach, you must be responsible. And your opinion must ideally be informed. It is fashionable to adopt a cause, but it helps to understand it first. Indian farmers are protesting because of 3 farm laws. It pertains to a sector that engages 1.3 billion Indians. It provides livelihood to 70% of Indian population and accounts for 15% of India's GDP. The 3 laws were passed by the Indian Parliament in September 2020. They were stayed by the Indian Supreme Court in January 2021. There is absolutely no scope for a foreign entertainer, activist or leader to play a role here. No exceptions are being made for a foreign parliament either. Claudia Webb is a British legislator. She wants Westminster to debate on Indian farm laws and press freedom, and the British government to make a public statement on the same. We just have one question: how will this help? Except for pandering to those who still are under a colonial hangover. Indian parliamentarians are the only set of legislators who can cater to Indian farmers. 11 rounds of talks have already been held. Like this statement from the Indian External Affairs Ministry makes clear, India is the world's largest functional democracy. It respects protests. It also respects sovereignty. The idea of a self-governing state, where tech giants can be pulled up for providing platforms to provocative posts and objectionable hashtags, and foreign entities slammed for uninformed and unwarranted comments. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now here's something every second person wants to be these days: an Instagram influencer. They mint money. They look picture perfect, they wear the season's latest trend and receive an unbelievable number of PR boxes with a plethora of products. You know, products they're expected to advertise, refer to, post about, even without really reviewing. The more people they can influence into buying a product, the more money they make. In order to pocket that extra cash, influencers often use filters while advertising a product. Let me give you an example. Say an influencer is endorsing a fairness cream, which itself should be problematic, a fairness cream, but it's not illegal yet to sell or endorse them. So if someone is endorsing a fairness cream, they can use a filter while clicking a photo and then attribute the instant fairness to the magical product. This happens a lot on social media. What we don't realize is that some campaigns are so organized and well-crafted that they do not come across as ads. There are no mentions of any filter, so people are easily misled and fooled into making purchases. The United Kingdom is now cracking down on this practice. The UK's Advertising Standards Authority has said filters should not be applied to social media advertisements if they exaggerate the effect of the product. Meaning, if you're endorsing a tanning product, you cannot use a tanning filter. If you're advertising an anti-blemish product, you cannot use a filter that makes your skin look blemish-free. This is a welcome move and more countries should follow, we say. You know why? Let me give you some data. Nearly 40% of Twitter users say they've made a purchase after reading a tweet from an influencer. 6 in 10 YouTube subscribers would follow advice on what to buy from their favorite influencer over their favorite TV or movie personality. The influencer market is very big. Most brands, especially startups, prefer advertising through influencers online rather than rolling out TV commercials or putting up hoardings across the city. Do you know 91% of the millennials polled say that they trust online reviews as much as friends and family? 91%. 50% of consumers take some action after reading a positive review online. Instagram is the most important platform for influencer marketing. The Instagram influencer market alone is worth $5 billion. This is new age advertising, and our laws need to evolve with time to incorporate this change, this new trend. There are laws for print ads, for TV ads. Why should social media be an exception? Why should we be fooled by filters and influencers? Think about it. We're taking a short break. Up next, Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now.
One World Trade Center, that is the one where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom for many years.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Work in progress.